The story began the way all quiet things begin, with a boy who looked at the sea like it was both a friend and a test. Wade was his name, a fisherman's son born under the salt wind and raised by the sound of waves slapping against old boats. His hands were rough before he turned 10, and his heart, well, his heart was soft in a way men from the coast tried not to show. Claire was the mayor's daughter, her world polished like the silver spoons they used at her dinner table. She wore ribbons that smelled of roses and spoke like sunlight itself. And yet, every time she walked by the docks, her eyes followed Wade, the boy with seaweed in his hair and something stubborn in his gaze. They met one afternoon when the tide was high and the wind smelled like rain. Wade was mending a net when a sudden gust carried Claire's hat straight into the water. Before she could even gasp, Wade dove in. He came up dripping, holding her hat like a crown, grinning as the waves clung to him. She laughed. Not the kind of laugh you learn from fancy dinners, but the kind that breaks rules. From that moment, something old and hungry began to stir between them. Something that didn't care about class or names. The town didn't like it. Folks whispered, "The mayor's daughter and a dock boy?" But Wade and Claire didn't hear them. They only heard the sea calling them both by name. Each evening, Claire found her way to the old pier, where the boards creaked like they were telling secrets. Wade would wait with 2 lanterns, one for her, one for the sea. They would sit side by side, feet swinging above the dark water, talking about dreams that didn't fit the smallness of their world. "I want to see what's past that horizon," Wade would say, his finger tracing the dark line between water and sky. "And I want to go with you," Claire would whisper. Sometimes they didn't talk at all. They just listened to the rhythm of the sea and the beating of 2 foolish hearts trying to match it. But the world is never kind to love that crosses lines. Claire's father found out. The mayor's voice could slice through a man's pride like a sharp blade. He called Wade a dock rat and forbade Claire from ever seeing him again. That night, Wade stood on the shore, staring out into the black water. His chest burned, not from anger, but from the kind of pain that doesn't find words. The waves licked his toes, whispering promises only the sea could keep. It was the beginning of storm season when everything changed. The clouds grew heavier each day, and the air carried a taste of waiting. Wade's father, Old Joe, had been coughing for weeks, but the sea doesn't care for sickness. Fish must be caught, nets must be cast. "Tomorrow we sail early," Joe said, his voice thin as seaweed. "There's a big catch waiting." Claire begged Wade not to go. "The wind smells wrong," she said, her hands trembling in his. "Stay on land, just this once." But Wade shook his head. "If I don't go, we don't eat." He kissed her forehead, a promise and a prayer in one breath, then turned toward the darkening sea. That morning, the sky was gray and the wind restless. The boats rocked like uneasy dreams, and the gulls flew low, their cries sharp and lonely. Wade and Joe pushed off before sunrise, their lanterns flickering against the mist. For a while, everything was quiet, too quiet. Then came the wind, a slow moan that turned into a scream. The waves rose like angry beasts, crashing against the boat with fists of foam. Wade gripped the oar, shouting over the roar, but his words vanished into the storm. "Hold fast, boy," his father cried. "Hold fast." But nature had already made up her mind. The sky split open, and the sea swallowed its own children. When the storm passed, the town gathered on the shore. Broken wood washed up like bones, nets tangled with seaweed. Someone found Joe's hat. But Wade was nowhere. Claire stood barefoot in the sand, her white dress clinging to her skin. The mayor tried to pull her back, but she broke free, calling Wade's name into the waves again and again until her voice cracked. They said the sea took him. They said no man could live through a storm like that. But Claire refused to believe. Every night, she went to the pier, lit 2 lanterns, one for herself, one for the sea, and waited. Some nights, folks swore they saw a figure far out on the water. Just a shadow, just a trick of moonlight. But Claire always whispered the same thing. "That's him. He's coming back." Days turned into weeks, and the town began to forget. That's the way small places are. Grief fades when the gossip runs out. But not for Claire. No, not for the girl who kept 2 lanterns burning by the shore. Every night, she sat at the edge of the old pier with her hair undone and her hope trembling in her chest. Sometimes she whispered prayers. Sometimes she just listened to the sigh of the water. The mayor begged her to stop. "He's gone, Claire," he said, his voice tired, his eyes soft with a father's worry. No good ever came from loving the sea. But she wouldn't listen. "He's still out there," she said. "I can feel him." And maybe she was right. For one moonless night, as she dozed beside her lantern, she heard a sound, faint, like footsteps on wet wood. When she opened her eyes, the flame flickered, and the wind whispered her name. Not like wind, but like a voice she once loved. Claire! The fisherman who went out the next morning came back pale. They swore they saw something strange near the reefs. A small wooden boat drifting, broken but not sunk. Inside, tangled in the net, was a man's jacket, Wade's jacket. Old Joe's friends pulled it ashore, silent as ghosts. They laid it before Claire like an offering. She pressed it to her face, breathing in the salt, the memory, the ache. "He's alive," she whispered again, her voice breaking but her eyes fierce. The sea wouldn't take him without a reason. The mayor turned away. He knew the sea better than most, and he knew it didn't trade in kindness. Still, that night, Claire carried the jacket to the pier and tied it to the post beside the lantern. The wind caught it, making it sway like a flag. If you were close enough, you might have sworn it moved on its own. Weeks passed, then months. The sea calmed, and the town went back to its rhythm. Fishing, praying, pretending. But Claire couldn't move on. She kept hearing things. Whispers from the waves. The sound of oars that never reached shore. One dawn, she walked down to the beach before anyone woke. The sand was cool, the tide low. And there, lying at the edge of the water, was something impossible. A single footprint. Bare, deep, and fresh. She followed it. One print became 2, then vanished into the sea foam. Her breath caught. Her heart raced. "Wade!" she called, her voice trembling with both fear and longing. Only the sea answered, rolling softly, almost tenderly, as if it wanted to tell her something but couldn't find the words. That same day, a strange man came to town. His clothes were torn, his hair sun-bleached, his eyes distant. Eyes that had seen too much. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried the rhythm of waves. He asked for work at the docks. Folks said he came from the south coast, maybe further. Nobody knew, but Claire knew. The first time she saw him, standing by the boats with his back turned, her breath caught like the wind had stopped. He turned slightly, and for a moment, she saw Wade's face, or maybe she just wanted to. But the man said his name was Cal. He didn't smile much, didn't talk about the sea either, just worked hard, always staring at the horizon like it held a secret. Still, Claire couldn't stay away. Night after night, she found herself walking down to the docks again. Sometimes she saw him there, Cal, mending nets under the lantern light, his hands moving like they remembered another life. One night, she gathered her courage. "You remind me of someone," she said softly. He looked up, his eyes catching the glow. "Maybe I am someone you used to know," he said. Her heart stumbled. "Wade." He didn't answer, just looked out at the sea. "Names wash away easy in the tide," he said. "But memories, they cling." And in that moment, she wasn't sure if she was talking to a man, or the sea itself, wearing the shape of the one she loved. For days after seeing him, Claire could think of nothing else. She tried to tell herself it was impossible, that men lost at sea don't come walking back with different names and old eyes. But her heart wouldn't let it go. Each evening she went to the dock, pretending to look at the sunset, pretending not to notice him mending nets near the last boat. But she noticed everything. The way he squinted against the wind, the small scar on his neck that Wade once had from a hook accident, the way his hand brushed the wood as if he knew it by heart. Finally, one night when the tide was high and the air smelled like rain again, she spoke. You never told me where you came from, she said. He didn't look up. Nowhere that matters. You talk like the sea took something from you, she said softly. He paused, his hands stilling on the rope. It takes from all of us, he said. Some more than others. And then, just barely, he smiled. That same crooked smile she thought she'd never see again. Her breath caught. Her knees nearly gave. Wade, she whispered. He didn't answer. But he didn't deny it either. He began to come by the pier more often after that. Not as Cal, not quite as Wade either. Just a man half alive, half adrift. Some nights he spoke. Other nights he sat silent, staring into the dark water. Claire never pushed. She just stayed beside him, her lantern glowing between them like a small heart refusing to die. Where were you? She asked one night, her voice trembling. In the in-between, he said. Between breath and water. Between remembering and forgetting. The storm didn't kill me. It left me somewhere else. She reached for his hand, and for a moment he let her hold it. But then he pulled away, eyes dark as the sea at midnight. You shouldn't have waited for me, he said. The man you loved drowned that night. No, she said, tears rising. You came back. That means something. He looked out toward the horizon, his voice a whisper. Maybe it means the sea wasn't finished with me yet. Wade tried to live among the living again, but it wasn't easy. The sea had taken pieces of him no one could see. He woke at night gasping, his body still fighting waves that weren't there. He couldn't stand thunder. It made him flinch, made his breath stumble. He took work on smaller boats, staying close to shore. But every time he set foot on the deck, the wind felt heavier, the sound of water like whispers only he could hear. The men at the docks began to talk. That new fella's strange, they said. Talks to the sea like it's an old friend. Wade didn't care. He wasn't talking to the sea, he was arguing with it. Why me? He would whisper. Why not my father? No answer ever came, just the endless hush of waves rolling in and out, like a sigh that never ends. Claire saw what the storm had done to him, and it tore her in two. She wanted to love him the way she did before, with laughter and soft dreams. But this new Wade was quieter, heavier, like he was still carrying the ocean inside him. One evening, she asked, Do you remember the night we met? When you saved my hat? He smiled faintly. I remember the color of the water that day, he said. It was calm. And now? He looked at her, his eyes glinting like wet sand. Now it's always moving. She reached out and touched his face. Then let me be still for you. For the first time he looked at her fully, and she saw him, truly saw him. The storm hadn't taken his body, but it had changed his soul. And she loved him still. But peace doesn't last long in a town that loves to whisper. The mayor found out Wade was alive. His anger came back stronger than before, mixed with something else. Fear. He remembered the night his daughter nearly drowned in love with a poor fisherman, and he wouldn't let that storm return. He called Wade to his office, under the heavy wooden beams and the smell of power. I buried your name once, he said coldly. Don't make me bury it again. Wade said nothing. He just stared at the floor, the way a man does when he's already lost too much to fight. The mayor leaned forward. Leave this town. Leave my daughter. The sea spared you once. Don't push your luck. But Wade wasn't afraid of death anymore. Only of living without her. That night, he went to the pier where Claire waited with 2 lanterns burning. The wind was gentle, the water calm. But inside him, another storm was gathering. The night after the mayor's warning, Wade stood by the pier longer than he ever had. The moon floated above the black water like a lonely coin, and the wind whispered things that sounded too much like truth. He thought about his father. The way Joe used to hum old sea songs before dawn. The way he'd say, "The sea don't take, boy, it trades." If that was true, Wade wondered what he'd traded for his life. He didn't notice Claire at first. She came barefoot, her dress brushing against the planks, her hair dancing in the wind. Tell me it's not true, she said. He turned, his face half in shadow. What did he tell you? That you're leaving. He sighed. the sound breaking inside him. He's right to want that. I don't belong here anymore. She stepped closer. Then where do you belong? Wade looked at the horizon, that endless gray line between promise and loss. Nowhere, I reckon. The waves sighed against the pier, and for a long while, neither of them spoke. Then Claire reached into her pocket and pulled out a small seashell. You gave me this the first night we watched the stars, she said. You told me it carried the sound of your world. She pressed it into his hand. So when you go, you'll remember who you are. He took it not because he believed, but because her hope was stronger than his despair. The next morning, Wade packed his few things, a rope, a knife, a spare shirt, and that shell. He told himself he was leaving for her sake, that maybe distance would heal what the storm had broken. But as he walked past the docks, the fishermen fell silent. They watched him go like men watching a ghost they'd rather not see again. He made it as far as the crossroads beyond the church when the wind changed. It came sharp and sudden, carrying the smell of rain. Behind him, the sky darkened. He froze. The clouds rolled low and heavy, the same way they had the night he almost died. The sea was calling again. He turned back, slow, unwilling, but drawn all the same. And far in the distance, he saw Claire running toward the shore, her lantern high, her voice breaking through the rising wind. Wade! She cried. Don't go! And in that moment the rain began. By the time he reached the pier, the storm was already building its voice. The waves slapped the rocks, angry and eager. The old boards beneath his feet groaned like they knew what was coming. Claire clung to him, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes wild with fear. It's happening again, she said. You can't go out there. I have to, he said. If I run now, the sea will keep chasing me. I need to face it or I'll never be free. She shook her head. The sea doesn't want freedom, Wade. It wants you. He kissed her then, deep, desperate, like a man trying to remember how to be alive. Then let it come, he said. I'm not afraid anymore. And before she could stop him, he ran toward the docks where a small fishing boat was still tied. He leapt aboard, untied the rope, and pushed off just as thunder cracked across the sky. Claire screamed his name, but the wind swallowed her voice. The boat drifted into the darkness, one lantern burning, a single flicker against the fury of the world. The storm came fast, tearing through the town with the memory of its last hunger. Roofs rattled, boats crashed against the rocks, and the pier split like an old bone. Claire refused to leave the shore. She stood in the rain, soaked to the soul, watching that tiny light vanish into the black. All around her, people shouted for her to come inside. But she couldn't move. Her heart was still out there, somewhere between the waves and the wind. She prayed, though she didn't know to whom. She begged, though she didn't know for what. And somewhere, beneath the howl of the storm, she swore she heard a voice, low and steady. I'm coming back. When dawn broke, the storm was gone, leaving the world raw and still. The beach was littered with broken wood and tangled nets. People came to count what the sea had taken this time. Claire walked the shore alone, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign. A boat, a body, a ghost. Nothing. But then, just as the sun began to rise, she saw something glimmering at the water's edge. She ran to it, her feet sinking in wet sand. It was the shell, the one she had given him. She held it to her ear, trembling. For a long time, she heard nothing, just the faint sigh of the tide. Then, soft as breath, came a whisper. Home. The town called it another tragedy, but to Claire, it was unfinished business. She refused the comfort of pity, refused the gentle lies. Maybe it's time to move on, her father said softly one morning. She looked at him, her eyes hollow and dry. You move on, father. I'm staying right here. He sighed, but he didn't argue. There was something in her tone that made even Power step back. So every evening, as the sun bled into the sea, Claire walked the shore. She carried the shell everywhere, pressed it to her ear when the wind rose, listened for the voice that never truly left her. Some nights, she swore she saw a light far out on the water. Not a star, Not a ship. Just one flickering lantern, dancing between the waves. And every time she saw it, her heart said the same thing. He kept his promise. But the sea never gives without taking again. One night, as Claire stood by the old pier, she heard a familiar sound, footsteps, slow and sure, echoing on the wet planks. She turned, her breath catching. There he was. Wade. His clothes were torn, his hair longer, his face pale as moonlight. But it was him. The same eyes, the same crooked smile that carried both love and sorrow. Wade, she whispered. He nodded, stepping closer. I told you I'd come back. She ran to him, arms open, heart wild. He caught her, held her close, and for a moment, the world stopped breathing. I thought I lost you, she cried. You did, he said softly. But I found my way back. They walked together down the beach, their hands barely touching. Claire couldn't stop looking at him, couldn't stop trying to believe he was real. He told her he'd been swept south by the current, found by a small crew, nursed back to health. He remembered the storm like a dream, flashes of water and light, his father's voice, then darkness. But there was something else in his eyes, something heavy he didn't speak. When she asked, he only said, I left part of me out there. She wanted to ask what that meant, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she whispered, You're here now. That's all that matters. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. For now, he said. Days passed. People in town began to whisper again. First in disbelief, then in fear. Some said it wasn't right, that a man could vanish into the sea twice and still walk the earth. Old fishermen made signs with their hands when he passed. Children hid behind their mothers. Wade didn't blame them. He didn't even argue. Sometimes he felt it too, like he'd brought something back from the deep that wasn't meant for land. He'd wake at night sweating, hearing the low hum of the tide even miles from the shore. Sometimes, in his dreams, he saw his father's face, calm, smiling, whispering, The sea don't take, boy, it trades. And each time, Wade would wake with the taste of salt on his lips and the sound of water dripping somewhere close. One night, Claire woke to find Wade standing outside her window, staring toward the sea. The moonlight washed over him, making him look half there, half elsewhere. Can't sleep? She asked, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. He didn't turn. It's calling again. Her heart stuttered. The sea. He nodded. It's louder this time, like it's remembering what it lost. She went to him, placing her hands on his shoulders. You don't owe it anything, she said. You gave enough. But Wade shook his head slowly. It gave me back when it shouldn't have. Nothing comes free. He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw something like peace and pain tangled together. If it calls again, he said softly, promise me you won't follow. She tried to smile through her tears. You know I can't promise that. After that night, Wade grew quieter. He still came to the shore, still helped mend nets and push boats, but his eyes were always on the horizon. He looked like a man living between two breaths, one for land, one for the sea. Claire tried to keep the light in their little house alive. She cooked his favorite meals, laughed at stories from before the storm, tried to remind him what warmth felt like. But sometimes, when she looked at him, she saw him slipping, not walking away but fading. You're drifting again, she whispered one morning as he stood at the window. He turned and smiled faintly. Maybe I never stopped. She went to him, took his hand, pressed it to her heart. Then let this hold you here. He looked down at her, eyes wet with something deeper than sorrow. I wish it could. That evening the wind changed again. It came from the west, heavy and strange, carrying a scent that only Wade recognized, salt and thunder and memory. By midnight the waves were rising. The air trembled with electricity. The gulls screamed and vanished inland. Claire woke to find Wade gone. The door was open, the lamp still burning. She ran out into the storm, her feet splashing through puddles, her heart pounding against the roar of the wind. She saw him on the pier, standing at the edge like a man standing on the edge of the world. The waves rose high beneath him, throwing silver spray into the air. "Wade!" she cried, her voice breaking through the storm. "Come back!" He turned slowly, his hair whipping, his face calm. Too calm. "I told you not to follow," he said. "I can't let you go," she shouted. "You don't have a choice," he said softly. "It's not me the sea wants. It's the debt." Lightning tore across the sky, and for one terrible moment, the whole world was white. Claire ran to him, gripping his arms, sobbing. "Then take me too," she said. "Whatever it takes. I won't live in a world without you." He smiled then, that same crooked, gentle smile that had once saved her hat from the sea. "You already gave me more than I ever earned," he said. And then, without another word, he leaned forward and kissed her. Slow, deep, like he was trying to leave his soul in her keeping. When he pulled back, the wind died for a heartbeat. The waves stilled, waiting. "Goodbye, Claire." He stepped backward, off the pier, into the waiting dark. For a moment, Claire couldn't breathe. The sea swallowed him without sound. The lantern fell from her hand and shattered on the planks, its flame dying with a hiss. She fell to her knees, screaming his name until her voice broke. But the storm didn't answer. When dawn came, the water was calm again. Too calm. The townsfolk found her sitting at the edge of the pier, her dress torn, her hair tangled with salt. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at the horizon with eyes that looked far beyond the world. They said she never went far after that. Every night, she lit 2 lanterns by the sea, one for her, one for him. And on quiet nights, when the wind was right, people swore they heard a man's voice from the waves whisper her name. Years passed, and time smoothed the story into legend. Folk still talk about the fisherman's son who loved the mayor's daughter, and how the sea took him twice but never quite kept him. On still nights, the ocean glows faintly near the old pier, a soft shimmer, like lantern light beneath the waves. Some say it's just the moon. Some say it's them, Wade and Claire, still keeping watch, side by side, waiting for a world where storms don't steal what love has earned. And if you ever walk that shore, barefoot in the hush of night, and listen close, you might just hear 2 voices beneath the tide. One calling, one answering, soft as prayer, steady as the sea.